Hello and welcome back. I am here again with my beautiful friends Tiffany, and today we're going to be diving into a lot around eclipse season and the equinox that is taking place, and death portals and navigating grief and loss, and especially at energetic times, like really powerful energetic portals, which we'll get into in a moment. But before we dive in, please feel free to comment, engage as we're sharing. If there are things that resonate, if you have questions, we will be checking back in on the comments. And yeah, it really helps us get an idea of what we can keep talking on, if there's key things to share more about later, and just to get to know you and connect with you more. So, with that said, Tiffany, I'm going to send it to you.
Hi, thanks for having me back. I'm so excited. I love our little chats. I know we kind of joke that there are therapy sessions, but what comes through is oftentimes really helpful for the collective energies. And I think there's a lot of power in two women connecting and sharing their intuition and trusting that, you know, the divine change is available for us and we're not crazy. So thanks for having me back.
Yeah, of course, of
Mm,
course. I feel like, um, I mean, you and I both are very tuned in with energy and stuff like that. And as we mentioned last week, a lot of times we're picking up on things that like the collective is experiencing, as well as, our own personal navigation. I want to talk about the eclipse and the energies of these big shifts that we're going into. I know you know more about it than I do. I feel like I know just kind of like surface level. But for me personally, I'm feeling such deep timeline shift taking place. And it's just been like ramping up the last week in terms of how strong I'm feeling everything in my body, and like things are falling away, and
mhm.
beautiful alignment with like manifestations for the next chapter. And it really is like such a powerful portal kind of energy. So what are you feeling, or where do you want to start with this topic?
Yeah. So I guess I think it would be helpful for you to understand like what we went through collectively, you and me went through the
Mm,
past 2 years and
mm,
how like we grew out of that because
mm,
I'm a Scorpio, you're a Taurus,
mm,
and the energies of the 2021, 22 eclipse season was on that Taurus, Scorpio, North Node, South Node switching.
mm,
And then it moved now into Libra and Aries. But we met during that time
mm.
of like upheaval. And I
Yeah.
know I know that we kept sharing a lot of things of like, wow, is it so hard right now? Like, why does this energy feel so hard? Um, so yeah, if you're a Libra or a Taurus, or I'm sorry, a Libra or an Aries, we have predominant placements in your chart for Libra and Aries, or you have that as your North Node, South Node, um, it's gonna feel really hard for this cycle. So it started in October, November of last year. Um, and essentially what's happening is you're moving from, this energy of like what you are growing out of into the energy of what you're here to do, like your purpose. Your North Node is your purpose. Um,
Mm.
and I know that I actually got eclipsed in 2022. The eclipse was on my birthday.
Oh,
So it
okay.
was
I was
like
gonna say, like, what do you
yeah,
mean?
eclipsed.
It's like I got
It
eclipse.
was
Like,
on
yeah,
it was on my birthday. So it was like extra
yeah.
intense.
Mm,
Um, I think one cool thing that came out of that though is that like I now don't just like take off on my birthday as a way of celebrating me. I take off as a way of like celebrating time
mm,
and stillness and like welcoming in like this is my birthday. This is the day that like I've gone around the sun for one completion. And I set the intentions for that next solar cycle of mine on my birthday
Mm.
now for the past 3 years. And it's been really beautiful. But anyway, I'm not an astrologer. You're not an astrologer, but we know energy, we feel energy, and we know what we just came out of for the past 2 years, this shift. And like in
Mhm.
so many ways, our purposes, you and I know this from being your friend, like have changed so much in the past
Mhm.
2 years. I mean, think about where you were trying to host these group
Yeah.
containers
Oh my gosh.
and you were like, no, this is not what I want to be doing
Mhm.
with my time. And community became really strong for me.
Mhm.
Um, so, you know, creating the retreats was like my primary focus of the past 2 years.
Mhm.
So lots of changes for those, especially if they're a Libra or an Aries.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like the way I understand it, and I could be wrong, but it feels very much like a realignment. And like
Mm-hmm.
you and I, that is the nature of the work that we do in terms of like connecting to your higher self and your soul's purpose. And I think these eclipse seasons or just big transitory periods in the astrology chart or the astrological cycle, it really is like this constant realignment. And so much of the last 2 years, definitely, as you said, like I feel like so many things fell away and there was a lot of turbulence and a lot of intense struggle, even though some things were like looking really beautiful and like lovely, underlying the
Mm-hmm.
energy and the discord, like it wasn't very harmonious. And I was constantly battling and clearing and having to do like such deep work that I remember being like, it can't continue to be this way. Like, really? Is this what it's gonna be? Yeah, I don't know. I was trying to make the most of it, but it was definitely not the easiest.
No.
Um, and totally feeling the shift and even seeing it from last summer leading into that final Taurus Scorpio eclipse in the fall, right? But yeah, like starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel and things were starting to make a little bit more sense of like, oh yeah, you're fighting for things that you didn't actually want and that weren't actually meant for you. And here's the path of least resistance, which is actually what you're here for. So, like, let's keep plugging away to get to that. And I think, regardless of what anyone's chart says, like eclipses in general, and we've got like the lunar one first, and then 2 weeks, I think 2 weeks later is the solar eclipse. But it really is kind of like just symbolically like the darkness before the rebirth, right? And like the clearing and then this big solar eclipse,
Mm-hmm.
like the light shining and moving into this big new chapter is the way that I feel it.
Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned like things falling away that weren't in alignment and like
Mm.
that truth coming to light. And we talked about that last week when we talked about our whole Instagram purpose and like trying not to fight the current and just going with,
Mhm.
what was easeful and what feels good. And you've had so many shifts since then, even.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel
And
like the last week has been a year.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But like Libra is is like that balanced communication, and
Mhm.
Aries is that drive for completion, like that drive to do messy action or to get things
Mhm.
rolling. And
Mhm.
it's funny to see how this is kind of like gently playing out in your cycle now versus like
Yeah.
if we had discovered this whole Instagram thing like 2 years ago, it would have felt really hard for us, I think. But like
Mhm.
we've already moved through our cycle of being eclipsed for 2 seasons,
Mhm. Yeah.
and it just feels easier to like understand that like when things are falling away, it's not a bad thing.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's also part of just navigating life in general is like I know you've had to do this in your life and I know this has been like core part of my process since 2011 when my brother passed was just like the realization of it's like a constant death and rebirth cycle, and the number of ego deaths and having to like shatter all the illusions of who I think I am or how I think the world works or what I think is possible or the limits I'm holding on to, and like breaking the walls around my heart, like all these different layers that have built up. And it is like this huge shattering to then keep coming closer to our true self as source and soul in a physical body. Um, and it's like, I think that's so beautiful. Like, I really love that work, even though it feels like
Mhm.
tough when you're in it or you're in the emotion. But the freedom that's on the other side is just so incredible because you're like, oh my gosh, this thing that had been holding me back or affecting me for who knows how long, like now it's not there at all. Like I've
Mhm.
just released that big emotional or energetic charge. And now I can have that quantum leap and can step into that new chapter as a completely new version of myself. And
Mhm.
for people who are maybe like newer to the journey or intimidated about embracing that, it's, I think it's truly the most beautiful thing. Like we're not meant to stay stagnant and hold these things forever.
Yeah, when you think about like the labels that you identify with
Mm,
and them falling away, um, like when you like source consciousness, like the starting point of consciousness, decided one day like what would happen if I know myself better and began to split into
mhm,
like group conscious. And there were no civilizations, there were no programs of what these light beings were identifying as. It was
mhm,
just emotions. It was unconditional love, it was hope, it was joy, it was
mhm,
following passion and desire. And no label is ever going to stand up to how source perceives your soul.
mhm,
So the quicker we can shed those labels,
mhm.
the faster we can kind of gain that path back to enlightenment, which is the way that your game piece levels up in this lifetime. And so you don't have to come back and repeat it all over again. So like end game, that's it.
Yeah,
Done for me. I get to go
yeah,
back to source, right? Like unless you
yeah,
want to be stuck in reincarnation cycle, that's on you.
yeah. Oh my gosh. Can we like, I'm gonna dive off on this for a side tangent because every that like, oh, that was beautiful. Everything you just shared. It made me think of because my mom was like super atheist, I guess, didn't believe in anything. My dad was super spiritual and believed in like karma, reincarnation, earth school, aliens, and galactic beings. And like, so I had like two very opposing forces and influences from them. But I remember when my brother passed away and like the grief was so intense, and it was probably like a year or so after I still, I mean, as you know, like it's not linear either. So there's no time
Mhm.
for what is normal for grieving, but it was still like super, super intense. And I really didn't want to stay here. Like I
Mhm.
had no drive to be a human. And like I never took any actions on it, but I was always in this place of like it probably would be nice to like not be here, and maybe there's different ways that something can happen and I can just go join him
Mhm.
over
Deep
there.
despair. Mhm.
Yeah. And because of my beliefs in karma and reincarnation, that's the only thing that kept me here. Because I remember having this thought, and it was like 19 years old, but I was just thinking, if I were to leave now, would that mean that a future version of me, like my soul, is still going to have to learn these certain lessons,
Mhm.
navigate this exact same level of grief and pain again, in a future reality or parallel reality. And it was this kind of like, if I if I can figure this out and get through it this time and hopefully learn these lessons, then like please, maybe that alleviates me from having to do it again. And that's been like a huge belief that I've taken with me over the years of like, no matter how challenging it is, it's just that hope that like if I'm learning this lesson now, then
Hmm.
maybe that's going to save me from having to learn it again. So like suffer and grow now instead of prolonging it and reincarnating. And I just was like, I don't want to have to go through this again in another lifetime.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really powerful realization to
Mhm.
make. When you get into quantum string theory and parallel lives, there's like 1167 um, versions of you existing at all times. And
Mhm.
so the fact that you were able to feel into their energetic despair of you taking an exit point in this timeline and saving them from that and having to play
Mhm.
out again in samsara, it's
Mhm.
like, I think that that's a really enlightened view to have. And I think
Mhm.
Derek would be really proud.
Yeah. Yeah, he was like, I'm not ready to see you yet.
Yeah, yeah. Please
He's like,
stay.
yeah. Like, just let me like do my thing
Hmm.
for a little bit. And I know he was still always like that energetic connection and soul connection was always there anyway. So I know I know he was with me regardless, even though he wasn't physically there. But I do agree it was like it's not your time to be out of the physical yet, Kara. So like stay here and keep plugging away and like
Hmm.
trusting that at some point down the road you'll be able to find purpose behind this. And yeah.
Hmm.
Mm,
Kind of takes us into like, I know we wanted to share a little bit about death portals and
mhm,
kind of what we experience through them that might help others because
mhm,
um, when there's really potent energies on the planet, it can be an exit point for some souls that, we're not ready to lose. Um, but I know that we both experienced death in such a, um, like it was so close to both our hearts, like you losing your brother, your best friend.
mhm,
And I just recently lost my dad this year after like a 6-year battle with cancer.
mhm,
Um, so I think what we have to share on that can maybe help some people with what they might end up having to go through. But
mhm,
um, how to start this part of it.
mhm. I think
um, yeah, go ahead.
um I was just gonna say I think like starting because well, yeah, if you're open to starting with your dad and the experience you had, because I think that was such a beautiful transition in terms of like how you held things because of your level of awareness at the time. And when
Hmm.
I think of the contrast to me at 18, and again, like really no clue about anything at that time, that was like my huge awakening was losing Derek. Um, like I didn't really know I didn't have any preparation
Hmm.
for handling it. And I think most people are in that boat. And what was beautiful of your experience with your dad, and then maybe a month later, my grandmother passed, and I wasn't super close with her, but there were really powerful connection points with her, and like me picking up on things and feeling the same symptoms that she was going through, and like really quantum entanglement kind of stuff. Um, so I think it's cool because we have all these different experiences that people will relate to, whether they're already feeling and like having those intuitive downloads or feeling the energy really strongly, or whether they're like me at 18 who
Mhm.
just has no clue but wants to understand more, or maybe wants to believe and have hope. So yeah, if you want to start
Yeah.
with yours.
Yeah. So I didn't really have a lot of death in my life. I had a period when I was 16, and they actually changed the driving laws where I'm from because there was a lot of teenagers my age getting their license and dying. And I knew quite a bit of,
Mm,
of friends that were seriously injured or passed the summer that I turned 16. Um, but then I like whatever was in my cards
mhm,
spared me from, experiencing death, but from like a close friend or family, um, until this year, like until I was 40.
mhm,
So, I know when I was 16, I lost like my first love and I was absolutely shattered from that.
mhm.
And, um, and, like you said, it's not linear. The grief still pops up sometimes when I hear songs that remind me of him. And,
Yeah.
um, but with my dad, it was a different story. Like there was this roller coaster of cancer. And, every time he would, he was diagnosed and he was told that he had less than a month to live and he needed to start treatment immediately. And he started chemo and then he had the tumor removed. And he basically was cancer free for quite a bit of time. And then he had another scan like at the year point, and they found some more cancer in this
Mm,
time in his liver. So it started in like in his colon and then popped up in his liver about a year later. And so he went through the process again. And the surgeries were so hard on him, like so hard on him. Um, I remember after the first one, they were pumping him full of fluid so much so that, and they say like you need to have like an ACL bag, like a hydration, but I don't know what they call that though, an IV
mm.
drip basically. And he gained 26 pounds of fluid, and it
Wow.
was like surrounding his lungs and his heart, and he became like very manic in expressing that he really felt like they were trying to drown him. And
Mm,
instead of taking him seriously, they um like secured him to the bed like they would like a
yeah,
psychiatric patient.
yeah,
And he was like 8 days out from surgery. Everything was looking good, except he was like flailing in his bed, thinking they were trying to drown him because this is like
yeah.
8 days of fluid. And and so my mom and I were like, well, he's gonna die, like we're gonna lose him. And this was like literally 2 months into his journey. And so
Mm,
we had that happen like multiple times. Like he had 4 surgeries, and
mm,
and it was really, really scary each time. So, we kind of took for granted that like there were periods of time where like he would be cancer free and then he would have another scan and the cancer would come back and then he would just go through another treatment and then like he'd be cancer free. And we're like, this is just his cycle. Like
mm.
this is how his life's going to be. And then after multiple liver surgeries, the doctor was like, we can't operate on your liver anymore. So we have to do, this would be what we would do for the first option or for a last case scenario. So like with liver cancer, they have the ability to do chemoablation, which is where they put like radiation right at the site. So they go in your femoral artery and they go all the way up
Mm,
and they deliver like radioactive beads right there. And he's like, well, the good news is we didn't damage the liver. We're not sure if it's going to take. Um, and then literally a month later, he was in liver failure and his labs came
wow.
back atrocious.
Mm,
And he was strong before that. So like in September, like he was really strong. He was doing
mm,
like my parents have a really big yard. They have a pool. He was closing his pool. He was like getting his house
yeah,
ready for like winter. He was
like
stacking like
super active.
super active, very strong. Like and everyone said
Mm,
that about him. They're like, oh my God, your dad was so strong.
mm,
And then a month later he was like falling to shit. And we were like,
mhm.
what is that? I mean, it probably was a clear case of medical malpractice, but my dad
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to have an autopsy. He just wanted to be cremated and left to
Yeah.
be. He's like, my body's been chopped up enough. I just want to go home. And we were like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, he was told on December 15th that there was like nothing that they could do for him. And you and I were talking around that time, and I remember processing it. Like, my dad was very busy growing up. When I was growing up, he was working multiple jobs so that we could have everything that we wanted or needed. And
Mm-hmm.
we grew up very middle class, but like I went to a private school because I wanted to, and like I could go on any trips. I went to Italy with school break one time. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I never heard no. My parents just worked, then they made it happen. And but because of that, I didn't have like a strong connection to him growing up. He
Mm-hmm.
wasn't like emotionally available to me as a child. And then, as you get older, as you grow into adults and you realize like my dad was just elevated from a guy to a dad one day,
Mm-hmm.
and he's just a regular dude. And then you have to form this like connection as an adult with your adult
Mm-hmm.
parents. You're not living in the house and you're not like unconditionally loving them like a child would anymore. And I was confused. I didn't know like how to process. Like I felt like he
Mm-hmm.
was emotionally disconnected. I remember telling you this, and I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know that I feel that sad. I mean, we've
Mm-hmm.
gone through the motions of like him almost dying multiple times. Um, but in the 15 days that he was on hospice, my dad had 90 visitors, and he
Mm-hmm.
gave everybody what they needed from him. When we came and we sat with him, he was expressive, he was loving, he was
Mm-hmm.
really um really in tune with what like your soul needed to hear before he left.
Yeah.
And um I got to spend my his last day with him. And in that moment, he had a nurse come in to check on him and clean him up. Like he was in a hospital bed, but shave him and all of that stuff. And it pulled him out of his like state of like unconsciousness and made him very agitated. And we were
Mm-hmm.
we were really watching him be agitated was very upsetting. So we called his main nurse, and she came over, and they drugged him a lot. But um she told me like, yeah, when you're in the process of dying, you're like naturally your consciousness like leaves your body. And in that moment that I heard that, I realized that as a breath facilitator, my dad was breathing like the death breath. And it's a three
Mm-hmm.
part, it's a three-part breath. You go through 3 cycles. But basically it's all mouth breathing, fast, rapid inhales. And anyone who's done like Wim Hof or holotropic
Mm-hmm.
breathing knows the power of an extended hyperventilation ventilated state. And what it does is causes your brain to release a molecule called DMT, dimethyltryptophan, and it is a hallucinogenic molecule. It's found in ayahuasca, and it allows you when you go in to do these styles of breath work to get into these non-ordinary states of consciousness. In that
Mm-hmm.
moment, she said his consciousness was out of his body and he was just waiting for his body to shut down. I realized, Tiff, you idiot, we don't have the ability to breathe like this just so
Mm-hmm.
that we can, on a random Saturday night, leave our body with breath work. We have the ability to breathe like this so that when we are dying naturally, our soul gets to go home and
Mm-hmm.
establish itself with our maker while our body peacefully just gives out and we do not experience any of it. And terminal agitation is the result of human beings interacting with a
Yeah.
spirit that has left the body
Yeah.
to like make things
They're like,
right for that body, to keep that body
yeah.
comfortable. But
Yeah.
it's not even there. Like our mind has left the building.
Yeah.
And so during his terminal agitation, um, his it would be like somebody walking in on you while you're doing breath work. You would be so confused. And
Hmm.
they have like the power of what they say, like they have the power of 10 men. My dad bolted up, upright, standing
Mm.
upright. He was like
Wow.
hours away from death,
Yeah.
but the agitation brought him
Yeah.
back into his body so fast. And like his lungs, like everything was starting to shut down. So he was like, I'm not supposed to be here. And he's like, oh my God,
Yeah.
I can't
And
calm down. And like he was very scared. So I gave him Reiki as a Reiki master. And I asked everyone to leave the room. And I just went up to his crown and I gave him Reiki. And I was immediately like starting to calm him down. He was starting to breathe more normally. And then his spirit took me with him. And we were on this beautiful blue, energetic, starry river. And I just felt like this amazing presence of the mother, like not his mom, but like the cosmic mother, this like welcoming home into like loving arms and like it's safe. And it was beautiful.
mm,
And um, afterwards, I shared that with my Reiki master teacher. And she was like, oh, that is Newt. It's how do you do it? It's Nut. It's the Egyptian goddess, the mother goddess.
mm,
And she's basically like Osiris, Set, and Isis's mother, the
mm,
start of like the pantheon of Egyptian gods. Um, so she is like the mother of the cosmos,
yeah.
and she welcomes souls on a starry, energetic blue
Mm,
river, and it's all
oh
over
my
her temple ceiling. This like painted
God.
river of stars, and I was like, oh my God, I saw it.
Mm,
And everything changed for me in that moment. And my dad was calm. And then that was about 40 minutes before he passed. And he just, kept doing his breath and his body just gave out. And he died with a smile on his face. And it was so beautiful
mm,
to witness
mm,
because the last time I had been introduced to death, it was so scary. It was like my best friend. I lost like everything. And this time it was so healing to be part of that and to like watch that process unfold and to gain this knowledge of the cosmic mother and our body's divine intelligence to know that like there is a way to bypass the system so that we don't feel pain and death. We're not even
mm.
there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's the westernized fear of death that then creates all these systems where we're like trying to prolong the body instead of honoring like the consciousness is ready to go and the consciousness isn't feeling any pain. Like our soul essence isn't feeling that. It's already transcended.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I feel like even when I've had out of body experiences with breath work or meditation or in my car accident, like the car accident, especially because it should have been this moment of insane fear and panic and like I could die right now, but it was the most safe, supported, like wrapped in this white light. And I just surrendered and like closed my eyes and had no fear or anxiety or anything. And it felt like all time had slowed in the like 10 seconds leading up to me losing full control.
Mm-hmm.
But it fully felt like I wasn't in the body at that time. And I was just tapped into source and to like my soul's essence. And it was all peace, like all just like feeling loved and held. Um,
Yeah. I had the same experience with a really, really bad car accident I was in too. And I actually have like zero recall of the moment of impact.
wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the body. And that brought me a lot of peace in that experience because um, I just realized that again, we are so much more than the body. And so there doesn't need to be such an intense fear about what that's going to feel like or be like.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. Thank
Mm.
you so much for sharing all of that too.
Yeah. I feel like it's important for people to know that. I don't know.
Mm. It reminds me of when I was in India, which was about maybe like 8 months after my car accident. So after my car accident, I I was like really struggling to figure things out. I had a lot of depersonalization and like couldn't ground back in my body after, like, and my anxiety was really intense, all these things. I started trying to do like daily yoga, um, just to help. But then it was actually when I found breath work, and that was the only thing that helped me clear out my trauma and fear around driving was like a daily breathwork practice. And I think I might be mixing timelines up, but I think that was when I then decided, okay, I'm going to go to India and do like my yoga teacher training, meditation, mindfulness, like really immerse myself in some of these other Eastern ways, because a lot of the Western ways are not supporting me and don't feel like they're helping guide me to more clarity or like more peace or anything. And when I was at my yoga teacher training, we did, and it was so interesting because a lot of people in my class were really triggered and offended because one of the last nights, the meditation teacher, he's like, we're going to do a meditation journey, um, for like the process of death or like something. And it was, he took us down a river, and it's like very similar to some of the things you're sharing of seeing your body kind of floating down this river, but then also having this separate higher perspective awareness of like the consciousness behind it. I personally loved it. Like I
Mm-hmm.
found it so peaceful, and I had connected with Derek deeper a few days before that actually had a connection to my car accident. Like I had all these pieces integrating beforehand, but I found it very relaxing and peaceful. But a lot of people in my class were extremely angry. Some like got up and stormed out because they were like, how are you guiding us into this like portal of death and like this thing, like it's so morbid, and like very, very angered by it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is providing you with insight to like what actually happens when we die. Like it was interesting to see the belief systems, right? Of
Yeah.
yeah, just like how different people reacted.
Mm.
Yeah. Whereas I'm like, I always was so curious of like I want to understand things better, because just the 3D or like really limited way of thinking like, oh, the body has passed away and that means you're done. Like you don't exist at all anymore. Like that felt terrifying to me.
Yeah.
So being able to connect to something bigger and realize like, yeah, the cosmic mother and cosmic father, and like we're held by the creator. We're just returning to source.
Yeah.
Like it's really not anything other than that.
Now when it gets to be beautiful.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if I do have the chance to die naturally, which I think we all want, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, I want it to be at home, and I want everybody
Hmm.
to know like not to touch me. Like don't bring me back into my body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You think of that too, like with your dad, it's as you said, the word agitation, but it is also it's like prolonging because it's just
Yeah.
this disturbance. And
Mm.
I felt that with my grandma a bit because she was like quite old. Honestly, don't even know. I think she's like 95 or 96 years old. And but like her quality of life had been horrible the last few years. And
Mhm.
um basically she was in an old folks home and they're just like keeping her alive, but she's just like sitting there slumped over, not really conscious. Like I was saying to my mom, I'm sure her soul left her body a long time ago because like there's not really anything there for her. But there, like this attempt to like keep someone alive,
Yeah.
And like there's no, she didn't even want to be alive, but she wasn't, because she wouldn't have passed the tests to like give her consent. They had to just
Yeah.
like do everything. So you just think of like, yeah, I feel like we're just doing things so backwards. And
Hmm.
because of the fear of death, that's what leads us to then like cling desperately of like, how can I,
Yeah. Prolong the state. Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah,
like pharmaceuticals, not to go down this rabbit hole, but they
mhm,
literally are doing that.
yeah,
And I witnessed it with my grandfather. He was like 94 when he passed. He wasn't able to swallow one of his Parkinson's meds anymore,
mhm,
and there was no other option. And so
yeah,
they finally, at the point of him, having like 8+ years of like deterioration, being
mhm,
held on life support by these drugs,
mhm.
like a regimen of like 20 pills a day, where it just does
Yeah.
nothing for improvement. It just keeps you like
You're just like
alive.
flatlining.
Yeah, yeah. And so when he wasn't able to swallow his pill for his main Parkinson's pill, they were like, okay, well, palliative care and hospice, there's nothing else we can do for him. That man died within like 72 hours.
Mhm.
And it's like, why did we do that to him for 8 years? He lost all his dignity.
Yeah.
He was like a shell of a person. He needed around the clock care. He couldn't stand up. He'd fall over from standing right on his face,
Mhm.
breaking bones in his face.
Yeah.
Why are we doing this to somebody?
Yeah. That was the same with my grandma. And it's just like you just, it makes no sense to like keep someone alive.
Yeah.
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 But
And
but the fear of death
mhm,
leads the person to the path of, allopathic healthcare where it's okay, compliance with your drugs will keep you alive,
mhm,
but that's all it is
mhm,
a fear of death. And
mhm. Yeah. And I
mhm,
think that's the beautiful thing of um any kind of, I don't know what I would even call it, but like whether it doesn't have to be spirituality, but whether it's just like inner work and openness. And again, like we said, like looking at these things and questioning and not being afraid to face your own emotions and face your own ego deaths and the natural cyclical rhythm of life, of like, there's things I'm navigating, I'm clearing, and then I'm being reborn. And then I'm like, oh, there's other things coming up. And like, do I want to stay with this, or am I okay to let it go? Or am
mhm,
I going to be in the fear and cling to it because it's what I know? And then I'm going to stay prolonging my suffering in this certain cycle, when in
yeah,
reality, again, like the soul is calling me into the next evolution and the next cycle. So like we have that, it's even those quotes that talk about just how every single year, every single stage of your life is kind of like a death to the old self. And
mhm,
I think if we learn to embrace that more openly and lovingly and see that is natural and that is just part of the human experience, it would allow us to embrace that next stage of the unknown,
mhm.
where we wouldn't have as much fear about like the full physical death and departure.
Yeah. I think a lot of that ties into the fact that like we have given away our authority and
Yeah.
seek external like
Mm-hmm.
authority and safety and providership. And we assign these roles of savior to decision
Mm-hmm.
makers and
Yeah.
doctors. And we never do the internal work and check in with how our
Mm-hmm.
body's actually responding. And it's like the term side effect.
Mm-hmm.
That is literally you giving away your sovereignty to have more sickness presenting
Mm-hmm.
itself instead of saying, no, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not okay with having these new random side effects that I now have to treat with other medication
That also have side
that
effects.
also have side effects. And instead, I'm
Yeah.
going to tune into this and say, like, what is the root cause of this? And how can I
Mm-hmm.
change it with my lifestyle?
Mm-hmm.
and my mindfulness and, you know,
Yeah.
whatever I'm doing to myself that's causing this,
Mm-hmm.
doing the exact opposite for a little period of time, tuning in and saying, like, back to that thing we
Mm-hmm.
talked about last week, the detox, like when you start to feel the shift
Yeah.
and that resonance in your body of like, okay, this feels right. That
Mm-hmm.
the medicine never felt right. But,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
grounding out in nature, being in the sun, eating, you know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
organic, yeah, like all of that stuff. One thing my dad's sickness taught me is like, I don't want to ever go through chemo if I were to um,
Mm-hmm.
develop cancer or whatever. I don't, I would want to go on a more holistic journey. And if it
Mm-hmm.
didn't work out, it didn't work out, but I'm not willing to take on all those side effects.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it's such a good point of the outsourcing because
Mm-hmm.
it's like instead of honoring where we're at and like our own what's in our control to change, we're outsourcing to something else or something that an authority has told us we should do and kind of blindly trusting that versus like it even ties back into what we had said, I think, before we started recording of just like trusting your intuition and trusting the things you're picking up on, whether it comes to that energetic connection, as we mentioned, with like grief and connecting to the soul, or if it is with like things you're putting in your body or ways you're handling certain health issues or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like, am I outsourcing this or am I being fully sovereign in how I'm handling it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The answer is probably no.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we've been like so deeply programmed not to be sovereign.
Mhm.
Um, and yet to
Yeah.
think that we are, or, um, yeah, it's so interesting. Yeah.
Mm.
We're
Death
good.
portals. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
A last thought with the death piece too and the energy and connecting to trusting your intuition because I feel like I know a lot of my viewers are women, but regardless, we all have intuitive gifts that we can connect to and this energetic connection between one another. And I feel like your share with your experience with your dad and like how you both like you got taken on this beautiful river with him. Um, it reminded me of right before I actually found out that Derek had passed away, I was crying uncontrollably on a plane thinking of him. And it was like the exact same time that my mom was finding him
Mhm.
and like he had passed away and I couldn't understand it and it was like the strongest grief, like not just little tears. I was just like sitting there bawling my eyes out. And my teammate beside me kind of was like, "Are you okay?" And I was just like, I had no idea why I was crying so much, but I was thinking of Derek. I was playing some of our favorite songs that we had together and thinking of like texting him once I landed to say like, "Oh, do you remember this
Incubus.
song?" Yeah, Incubus. Yeah, and like remember this Oasis song from the end of this movie we used to watch, like the butterfly effect. And I had all these like it was like again this quantum entanglement of all these things that I was feeling and picking up on. And I didn't understand why. And then when the plane landed, I turned my phone on and had a text from my mom and she said, "Call me when you land." And I had just talked to her before getting on the plane, and like I could tell by the tone that it wasn't good and by my emotions. And I remember like I knew instantaneously that it
Mhm.
was Derek. Um, and I texted him right away and I just said, "Are you okay?" And we had the blackberries. So like you could see if it was delivered or if it was red, and it was delivered, but like it never never turned to red. And I'm just like, everything in me knew though that it was going to be about him.
Mhm.
And um, my mind tried to convince me, and I tried to think like, well, maybe your mom, like maybe something happened to your grandma, or maybe something happened to your dad. Maybe it's someone else. But like everything in my heart and soul knew that it was my brother. And again, it was one of those moments of like, and I didn't necessarily appreciate it, the awareness and like the
Mhm.
intensity of it, because at the time the grief and everything was still too much. But like years later, I can look back and go, it was actually so beautiful that like I truly feel like I was feeling his energy, and he was there while I was on the plane, and I was already feeling the grief and like of everything my mom was going through at the house. And it was like this interconnectedness that I just didn't have the awareness or full like understanding yet that I do now to realize what was actually happening.
Yeah. That is wild. That must be one of your gifts because it happened with your grandmother as well.
Mm, yeah,
It's
I
like
actually, yeah.
energetic transmuter
Mm,
of, yeah, like you basically connect with their spirit and help them
mm,
transition in real time.
yeah, yeah.
Or
I
their
feel
spirit
like,
connects with you. Just here I am. Like it's
yeah,
not
they're
with you.
yeah, they're just like, I'm showing up. Um, yeah, I feel it's interesting because when I started doing more of the work later, I actually had the thought like maybe I meant to be like a death doula, and like I was gonna go work in old folks' homes and be like, I honestly felt like maybe I'm here to be kind of a conduit and like uh a physical portal with their energetic portal that they're going through, of like someone who's here with them as they're navigating that. Um, but yeah, because like with Derek, it was so strong, and then like he's continued to just be like super energetically present and really powerful in that way. And then yeah, with my grandma, it was like she ended up getting, I think it was probably COVID the last few days, and that's what finally helped take her. But the first couple days when she had a fever, I was like suddenly going through this immense fever and like bedridden and hot and cold flashes, and hot and cold sweats and everything. And then like the next day or whatever, I was going through the coughing and stuff. She was laying in bed super restless, coughing, and it was like the timing of it again could have been completely coincidental. Um, and I don't think I had COVID, but it was just like really wild to be experiencing it. And so it felt like a bit of that of, yeah, maybe I'm like helping transmute
Mhm.
some of these things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I definitely think as like a energetic healer, there's so many gifts that we have at our fingertips that we don't even realize the depth of.
Mm-hmm.
And in this time of specifically like the silent generation and boomers beginning to transition, they, there is so much fear of death
Mm-hmm.
in those generations, particularly
Mm-hmm.
with like the advent of allopathic and like that savior mentality of what medicine can do and like not even just say following that science of it, but
Mm-hmm.
um like they spend the majority of the past 5 decades, 6 decades outsourcing their authority over themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And is it your purpose to be a death doula? Maybe, maybe not. But even if it isn't, it is a valuable resource that the collective needs right now. And I realized that in the moment that my dad was transitioning as well. It's
Mm-hmm.
just like, how beautiful would it be if everybody had a resource available for them to be a calm pillar in the room holding down
Mm-hmm.
peace and helping people to just not fear the
Mm-hmm.
transition. Um, like how powerful would that be? And how quickly would that change the narrative of the fear of
Mm-hmm.
death? And also how quickly would that help to alleviate samsara of these
Mm-hmm.
spirits that leave like in ways that tie them to another lifetime here rather than resolving it
Yeah.
on their like river of
Mm-hmm.
stars on the way out.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's actually, yeah, it's so beautiful. And you think of even people who pass away and are totally alone or who are leaving, yeah, with that intense level of fear um or pain. And I've always believed that because I've always believed in like a God and that loving creator, it's like I don't believe that there is suffering in the passing. Kind of like
Mm-hmm.
you said, the physical body might be shutting down or might be experiencing something, but in terms of like the full essence of what we are, we're not feeling that pain.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's beautiful. And hopefully it does continue to shift with more awareness and everything. Um, you're so right. It's like it's not what I want to do for like a living necessarily by any means. But like yeah, right when my grandma passed, a neighbor at the lake, an older gentleman, he I texted with him like the day before he passed away. And I'm thinking of an aunt who was like very estranged, but she came back into my life right before, like a few months before she was passing. And like it's interesting actually. I didn't realize that pattern
Mm-hmm.
of the grief piece of like how interwoven that is for me. Yeah.
Mm.
Mm.
Wow. And that's like really, really powerful that they're following the nudges so
Mm.
intently to like make contact with you.
Mm.
That's cool.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. It's beautiful. I'm like, if I can help be a little earth angel as you're
Yeah.
navigating, then I'd love to. Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, like a death doula, any type of doula is really just here to help you transition through archetypes.
Hmm.
And so you already do that on an
Hmm.
energetic level in the quantum with your clients, helping
Hmm.
them transition from, like a um, wounded caregiver to, that
Hmm.
queendom that they desire, like this
Hmm.
transition. So it makes sense that that's like tied to the blueprint of your soul as like a archetypal
Hmm.
shifting energy, really
Hmm.
understanding and embodying that, it's not just from birth to death or whatever. It's all those changes that we have during our lives that you are this like master at
Hmm.
understanding the blueprint that needs to happen during the shift.
Hmm. Yeah. It's that constant alchemizing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Between, yeah. Oh, thank you for that reflection. I love that.
Yes. I hope you
Mm.
receive.
Yes, I do. I do.
Mm.
Um, with that said, let's finish off coming back to where we started with um this kind of eclipse portal, this darkness with the lunar eclipse and the solar eclipse, the light. We mentioned the equinox and stuff, but we might save that for next week. Um, but yeah, just like with collective energies, we touched on it briefly, but maybe what are some things that you're picking up on or just from your own awareness and knowledge people might be feeling or experiencing so that if anyone is going through this over the next few weeks, it's maybe that extra validation of like you're not crazy. Trust what you're going through or trust what's coming up and keep like tuning in deeper to yourself around like what is this showing me so that you can navigate it and feel empowered in the process.
Yeah. So I think the themes that are really coming up for me right now, is this period of like liminal space, this holding pattern, really starting to shift. And I believe that's tied to the spring equinox, that energy moving forward. Aries season is like this call to action ruled by the planet
Mhm.
Mars. But it's not to say that everything in your life that's holding you in that liminal space is meant to shift forward. And I
Mhm.
think one of the main themes is grace, and like this
Mm.
understanding of like, I'm not being lazy, or I'm not doing
Mm.
enough, or whatever feeling liminality brings to you. I know for me, it makes me feel a little bit of angst around being lazy, and we've talked about like sloth.
Mhm.
um, but yeah, so like having the grace to realize that like shifts are happening, and if it's not moving forward, maybe it's one of those things that's being let go of in this shedding cycle. Um,
Mhm.
and I'll let you respond to that. But the other thing that's coming up for me with the energies right now is really it has to do around like multi-dimensionality, and even like the limitations that we place on ourselves, um, of like, and we talked about this a little bit last week with like people connecting to their channel and thinking that they are like receiving guidance, um, but
Mhm.
it might be like out of alignment. um, and how I mean to kind of express this is, there's so much about me that I continue to discover on like a daily basis. And to limit yourself by saying that you're here for one purpose or one
Mhm.
mission or whatever is exactly that. It's limiting, and it's putting labels on it. And I think that we need to kind of move into this mm, hypervigilant state of awareness around the fact that we are multidimensional, and our
Mhm.
souls have been navigating that space for all of time.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
our purpose is going to be multifaceted. Like, you obviously just uncovered a purpose that you had no idea you even had on this call today.
Yeah.
and and like, allowing that to hit your body with surprise and joy and like hope, and letting it find its peace inside of your beingness, rather than saying, no, I've already found my purpose and it's supposed to be this, and this just seems so opposite or different.
Mhm.
So those are the themes that I'm kind of picking up on.
I love yeah, I love the mention of like the multidimensionality because yeah, I think we're shifting more and more out of the ego and into soul, which is boundless. And so like the ego wants that label or wants that one true purpose. And I know I've struggled with that my whole life of like I'm meant to be a yoga teacher and like teach at hostels on the beach, and that's how I can travel the world and help people.
Yeah.
And then I like pursue that, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that at all, actually. Like, and then I'm like, my purpose is to do this thing. And like, if we attach too strongly to it, then eventually, like, we're either going to end up in like a dissonance and it's going to be painful, or we're going to be forced to separate and go where we're meant to go. And I feel like, yeah, that kind of openness that also does come from the liminal space that allows us to then like piece all of it. And
Mm-hmm.
like it can be this thing in certain ways, but it's also this thing. And when this, person reaches out or shows up, maybe I'm embodying a different part, and like all those aspects of self that get to then express themselves fully.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that deeper integration of the multidimensionality of like, this is all of me, instead of let me just be this one aspect who's fitting in this box so that it's neat and tidy and it makes sense. And you can understand how I fit into your world and I can conform, like all of it, that box living
Mm-hmm.
is like shattering and going to continue to shatter, thankfully. Um, one thing that you made me think of when you mentioned the liminal space is like I've been doing a lot of work around womb healing the last like month or so. And one of the most beautiful things that was shared was just a reminder of like the birth and the creation comes from stillness,
Mhm.
and it comes from that open space. And it's not in the doing and the hustling and the I need to fill my time by being more busy. It's actually like when we slow down, we stop, we rest, we open up, and we receive that. Then, like, that is when the huge download comes in, or you open up energetically and suddenly something aligns and the person reaches out and it opens up an entirely new timeline for you.
Mhm.
It's like when we're not giving into the hustle mentality and we trust that we're supported and that we can relax and be guided, um, truly like new life gets born and created from that space. And yeah, I feel that so much even with what I've been experiencing the last few weeks and what I'm feeling moving forward is like the way things are tying in right now is like so beautiful, and it's not something I could have like forced and it's definitely
Mhm.
not something I could have like hustled to create. It's just like full alignment.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I love how we like master our own little therapies
Yeah.
and then like it opens up opens up so much for us. Um
Hmm.
yeah, while you were talking about that, I was kind of like, I always my conversations evolve. Um, you talked about like the hustle and staying busy, and I was like reminded, like the
Hmm.
distraction is so strong right now. Like
Hmm.
there is so much out there that is taking you off stillness or off of, quiet
Hmm.
mindfulness, which will allow you to connect with whatever intuition or messaging you need to receive. But like I was talking to my husband the other day, I'm like, experiences are expensive, but entertainment is cheap. And it's cheap for a reason.
Yeah.
And like the word is a spell.
Mm.
It's in training your mind um to like receive frequencies that are not of your highest, you know,
Hmm.
your
Yeah.
highest expression. And it's kind of it goes alongside of like food. Organic food is expensive, but like
Mm.
the food that's really bad for you is cheap and affordable.
Yeah.
Starting to see
Like,
through the lens of like what is cheap and available is there for a reason to distract you from
mm.
being in stillness and being
Hmm.
available. Hmm.
Yeah. It's like the things that actually have true value
Hmm.
are made less accessible or less affordable. And there's a reason for that.
Hmm.
Yeah. And that reminder. And it ties in with the Instagram conversation of like this thing that's free, that's accessible so easily, like right there all day, pulls you in. And like, is that what value does that have? And how is that actually like holding you back from you being in your highest alignment to create the things you're here to create, or just spread more love and positivity, but instead you're plugged in over here, or yeah, the unhealthy foods and
Hmm.
entertainment. Yeah, the fact that like this is why widely accessible on our TVs. And when you realize like what they're plugging us into with that too, and you're like, is this actually bringing value to my life? Or is this actually holding me back or potentially making me worse?
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
and yeah,
And if it's free, then you are the product.
yeah,
Your data and your energy is the
hmm,
product.
yeah. And then that
Mm.
comes back to that whole reclaiming the sovereignty of actually like, I don't want to be outsourcing or dialing into these things. Um, I want to be in control of myself, my mind, my body, my soul, and where where can I be more intentional with like what I'm focusing on or giving to?
Hmm. Yeah.
Yay. Beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful way to
Way to
summarize
wrap
this.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as always, thank you for being here, Tiffany.
Mm.
And thank you to everyone watching or listening to this on the podcast. I hope it was supportive. Um, if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, as I said, please definitely drop those down below. And yeah, keep navigating this change and using this kind of portal as an opportunity to like lean more into like what is your heart telling you or what is your soul telling you? What do you truly need? And not outsourcing as much. Even though we've just spent time like being an outsource by sharing this knowledge. But I feel like everything we've shared is like come back to yourself, like and your true expression.
Hmm.
Mm, yeah.
Hopefully you're
Yay.
listening while you're doing something intentional that you love to do.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Okay, beautiful. Well,
Thank
we
you,
will see you
friend.
again soon. Thank you, Tiffany.
Yes.
Yay.